Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl, the Brooke Ashley, and today we are here to discuss The Real Housewives of Atlanta, Season 14, Reunion Part 1. And when I tell you that this first part was actually quite entertaining, a lot of stuff happened, we have a lot to talk about. But before we get into that, I just want to say thank you guys. We hit 15,000 subscribers this weekend, and I am beyond grateful. I am touched. And you know, a celebration is not complete without some champagne, so you guys don't have to pour it up. Woo! Cheers, y'all. So good. Once again, thank you guys so much. I love y'all. And with all that being said, let us jump right on into this recap because we don't have a minute to spare and I have so much to say. So, we open up this first part of the reunion with all the ladies in New York. Everybody's arriving to get glammed up. It's early in the morning because we know that reunion day is a good 16 to 18 hour day. So, did anybody notice that Marlo was wearing a sweater that said iconic ex-con? I said, I hope she gave Kenya a few dollars because Kenya was the one who called her that. She coined the phrase. So now we see Andy arrive on set. He's waiting for all the ladies to come out. The set was gorgeous. They had recreated Sonya's Jamaica trip. They had a bridge. They had a moat filled with water. It looked really good. So one by one, we have the ladies come out and join Andy on the set. Drew comes out first, then Sonya's following right behind her. Shereé comes out next. She's sitting right next to Andy. And it was so funny because Andy was even like, you know, all the years that you've been on this show, you've never sat next to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. Shereé has always been either in the middle or at the end. I said 14 years later, and now she's finally getting the first seat next to Andy. And I have to admit, it was so weird seeing Kenya in the middle. I mean, I know there have been a few seasons where she was in the middle, but for the most part, she's been in the seat directly next to Andy for some years. So just seeing Charade in the first seat and then Kenya in the middle, I was like, I don't like this arrangement. Now, looks-wise, I love the color scheme. I absolutely loved Kenya, Drew, and Kandi's looks at this reunion. I loved Kenya's dress. Her hair was flawless. She looked gorgeous. I thought that Drew looked really good. Definitely one of her best looks. And I know that everybody gives her a hard time on her fashions, but I thought that she did a great job. So all the ladies are seated, and now it's time for the reunion to start. We already know how it goes during the reunions. Andy always likes to break the ice before they start fighting. So he starts it off by asking Kenya how she's doing. He's like, you know, how is the moment doing? And she says that she's doing well. She's in her renaissance, so she might just drop a new song for them. Now, when she said renaissance, I immediately thought about Beyonce and how I cannot stop playing that damn album. Like, I literally cannot listen to anybody else. So anyhow, he moves on to Marlo. He's like, Marlo, how does it feel to be joining this reunion as an actual full-time housewife? And she says that it feels great, and it feels even better because she's sitting next to him. And I said, Marlo, please don't get too comfortable because this just might be your first and your last season as a full-time peach holder because you tried it. The things that you say to people when you're angry are just so vile and so disgusting. You really do go below the belt. And it takes the fun out of watching this show. So I said, just enjoy this time of you sitting next to Andy because, again, it might be grand opening, grand closing for you. But we'll talk more about Marlo later on. So now Andy's asking Shereé how she's doing. He also mentions that in all these years, she has never sat next to him at a reunion. And then he brings up that she has a new boo. So, you know, Shereé's just laughing, and you already know that Andy's going to talk about this later. And I said, yes, Andy, let's talk about Martell Holt from Love and Marriage Huntsville, because that union is a hot mess. So now we kick things off with Andy asking a shady question about, did Shereé reclaim her title as the OG bone collector, or did somebody else take her spot this season? So now we see a montage playing of all the ladies spilling tea, and it was so funny because at the side, there was a poll with all their names on who was being a bone collector. And pretty much it was like a 5-way tie with everybody getting bones. So now we have Andy reading a viewer question asking Sanya, how does she feel hearing Shereé call her a bone collector in training? And does she want to fill the role? So Sanya says that she's not a bone collector in training and how she does not want to fill that role whatsoever. And Shereé says, but Sanya, you actually did do a great job. Now, Sanya, I thought it was comical that you were saying, I don't want to fill that role. I don't want to fill those shoes, because you were carrying bones all season long. I thought it was so petty of you to go back and tell Marlo what was said at Marlo's little archive event in the first episode. And then when you went and opened your mouth and told Marlo what Kenya had said about her when you guys were at Blue Ridge, like, that wasn't needed. So you are very messy. And for you to act like, well, no, I don't want to be a bone collector, that's not what I am. It's like, girl, yes, you are. Because if we're being real, you did not have a concrete storyline. So you were definitely instigating mess to try to keep yourself on this show. So now Andy reads another viewer question for Drew. And the question reads, did Drew bring any bones today? Because she's literally trying to be the new bone collector. So Drew says, I think that Shereé left some bones, so I just took them and gave them to her friend, her little chihuahua. So Shereé says, my friend is not a chihuahua, and we all know who she's talking about. Drew had a lot of friction with Shereé's friend Fatum, and remember when she threw those bones at her earlier on in this season. So now you have Andy reading another viewer question asking Drew, why did she call Sanya a bone collector when she ran back and told Kandi that Kenya had a problem with the vibrating panties when they were in New York? So, mind you, Drew doesn't even hear the question because she's still arguing with Shereé. So they're going back and forth. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, can y'all just get off of this? Like, is it really that deep? So Andy was like, did you guys even hear what I asked you? And she was like, oh, sorry, I was going back and forth with Shereé. So now Andy reads another viewer question for Shereé. And the question reads, did Shereé know about the bones that Fatum collected regarding Ralph and Drew before she hung out with her? Because it seems like Shereé let Fatum do her dirty work so that Shereé could keep her hands clean. So Shereé says absolutely not, because Anthony had given me this information before I even knew that he was working with Drew. And then she adds that Fatum also knew this info, but she never thought that Fatum would repeat it. And then Shereé adds on that she would have never said that because she doesn't believe that Ralph is gay. Drew makes it clear that she doesn't believe what Shereé is saying. I also don't believe what Shereé is saying either. We all know that Shereé has a bad habit with lying. So I definitely would not be surprised if Shereé did put Fatum up to it to reveal that info that they both heard from Anthony. I don't believe that Shereé is innocent for a minute. I think that she said, you know what, Fatum, if you want to get a peach for next season, do something crazy and reveal what Anthony told us. That's what I think happened. So since Anthony has now been brought up, Drew's like, so again, what was Anthony to you? Was he your assistant or your helper? So now Shereé says, well, I'm glad that you brought Anthony up. Let's call him up right now. And so Andy was like, please don't. I do not want to hear from Anthony right now. We can do this at a later time. So now they change gears in the conversation, and Andy reads a viewer question for Marlo, asking if Marlo was upset that Shereé went back and told Kenya what she said about Kenya borrowing and driving around in Lisa Ray's Range Rover. So Marlo says no, because I just repeated what I heard. So now Kenya jumps in to clear her name, and she says that she and Lisa Ray came up in Hollywood at the same time, and they were recently on a show together, and they both cleared up the rumors, and she never drove Lisa Ray's Range Rover. But then she adds that Lisa Ray told her that she can drive her car anytime if she wants to. Now, we've all heard a lot of rumors about Kenya over the years, but I had never heard that rumor about her borrowing Lisa Ray's Range Rover. So a part of me feels like Marlo probably made that rumor up herself, because that's just how Marlo's mind works. Like I've said in past recaps, Marlo is a dangerous person to get into an argument with, because she will resort to lying about you if she's losing the argument. She's somebody that you have to just ignore and pay her complete dust, because somebody who will resort and just lying on you and pulling things out of their ass to make you look bad, that's somebody that you don't even need to get into an argument with. And honestly, if we're talking about anybody on this cast borrowing somebody else's car, I would think that Shereé would be somebody to do that, because we know how Charade gets down, and we'll talk more about that later on. So now Andy reads another viewer question for Sonya and Drew, asking them both how did they feel when they watched it back when Kenya went and told Sonya what Drew said about her in regards to Drew saying that Sonya does not have a mind of her own. The viewer wanted to know, did they think that Kenya was being a pot stirrer or instigating because the fact that she ran back and told what Drew said? So Kenya says, well, no, it wasn't pot stirring. I just feel like people should know what's being said about them. And Kenya, it was a bit messy of you, because let's face it, the nature of this show, you guys do run back and you tell what the other person said. And in real life, that is considered messy. So Drew says, look, I said it and I stand by what I said. So Sonya's upset, and then Drew says, I mean, we know that you're a great runner, but it seems like that's all there is. There's not much else. Now, did anybody notice that Drew was actually pretty quick on her feet with the reads during this first part? And, she wasn't raising her voice or anything, but it was just those, quiet, subtle reads towards Sonya throughout this episode that had me saying, okay, Drew, say what you want about Drew. Drew can definitely hold her own with the other women when she's getting into arguments with them. And that's definitely a feat, because we see other newbies come on these shows and they are one and dones. They can't handle the arguments. They can't handle the shade. So I do have to commend Drew. I think that Drew might be on here for another 3, 4, 5 seasons. So now Sonya says, Drew, you and I have both been on this earth the same amount of time, and all you've accomplished is mediocrity. And I was thinking, Sonya, the read could have landed had you just said the right word. I was like, it's mediocrity, sis. And somebody on Twitter made a fantastic point that while you might have 4 Olympic gold medals, sis, you guys are still sitting on the same couch on the same show. We are now on to the Shereé portion, and y'all, so much needs to be said about Shereé. There needs to be a case study done on Shereé, because something just isn't clicking in her head. The pea-brain logic, I just don't understand. But anyhow, Andy says, first off, congratulations. She by Charade, you had a fashion show with some fashions, and I actually shed a tear. So now Andy wants to know, where is She by Charade now? Like, what's the deal? And Charade says that the website is finished, it's all set. So Andy's like, okay, but if I go on the website right now, shebysheree.com, I still don't see any fashions to purchase. So Charade says that fashions will be available to purchase once the finale airs. Now, the finale was last week. We all went on their website, and it took forever and a day to see some clothes appear. Now, I did see a few days ago that Charade finally did revamp the website. I think she finally paid somebody to redo everything and to have a functional site, and she even had a 20% off sale. Still no refunds, but she's giving you guys 20% off. Now, Charade, you knew what you were doing by not having that site up, because Andy would have clowned you for having a t-shirt that says, "Who gonna check me, boo?" and a faded picture of you selling for $142 American dollars. You knew what you were doing, because that definitely would have been a topic of discussion. Like, why do you have these cheap t-shirts that are wrinkled selling for over $100. And hoodies that are selling for $242. Like, girl, this is not Ivy Park. This is not Balenciaga. This is not Gucci. Again, I just want to know what goes through Shereé's head. And also, if any of you guys have purchased anything from She by Shereé, please let me know down in the comments. So now, Andy brings up that infamous moment when they were at the season, I think, 10 reunion. And Andy had asked Shereé, when could they expect She by Shereé? And she said spring, summer, September. And he wants to know, was that embarrassing for Shereé? Did she ever feel humiliated? Because everybody was joking on her about that. Now, one thing about Shereé, Shereé will always give you a BS answer when she is not going to tell you the truth. So she says, well, you know, for me, the question caught me off guard. And my priority has always been raising my family. So at the time, I just put She by Shereé at the back burner because I was focused on my family. So now Andy says, well, then why not just say that? So now Kenya interrupts and says, look, Shereé, much like your house, we just want to see you win. It just seems like Shereé is very prideful and she gets very embarrassed about things. And that's the reason why she has a hard time telling the truth. She was better off coming clean and saying, you know what, Andy, She by Shereé is put on the back burner for right now because I just don't have it. I'm trying to pay these bills, take care of these kids, send my kids off to college, and finish paying for the chateau. So no, I don't have an extra 6 figures lying around to pour into She by Shereé. Just keep it real. Folks respect you more when you tell the truth and you're honest. So now Andy reads a viewer question for Shereé, asking, when Marlo had that Fendi shopping experience for her at her house, did Marlo actually make her pay for all that stuff? And did she return it the next day? So Shereé says, hell yeah, she made me buy all that stuff. Like, how do you treat somebody with their own credit card? And then you have Marlo over there saying, yeah, I mean, why would I pay for it? And I was thinking, Marlo, you're always talking about friendship and being a good friend to people and how you have so much money, you're so rich, you got it like that, then why not treat your friend? If my friend is going through a breakup, if there was a death in her family, right? And if I have the extra money and I'm like, hey girl, let's go shopping, it's all on me, like I got my friend. Or if I want to get my friend out the house and they're having a hard time, I wouldn't expect my friend who just dealt with some major loss to pay for her own dinner. Obviously, I would treat her, and I'm not saying that Marlo had to buy everything that Shereé picked out, but she could have easily said, hey Shereé, let me buy that clutch for you, let me buy a scarf, the sunglasses, something. That's just what a good friend does. I couldn't imagine doing that. I would have been annoyed too. And it's not even about being cheap or wanting somebody else to buy my stuff. It's just about the principle. Like, how do you invite me over under the guise of you're treating me, but now I have to pay for my own stuff? Like, really? But you know, I'm not surprised because Marlo's not a great friend. Marlo doesn't know the value of friendship. So I wasn't surprised that she would do a stunt like that. Marlo also strikes me as somebody where if the person has a lot more than her, then she would treat them because she wants to impress them. Now, did you notice that Shereé did not answer the second half of the question because the viewer asked her, did you return the items? And Shereé didn't answer that part. I was surprised and annoyed that Andy didn't press her on it. He just let that slide. I was like, Andy, I need you to be on it. I would have said, no, Shereé, you don't get off that easy. Did you return that stuff or do you still have it in your closet? When it comes to Shereé, we know how she is. She is infamous. Many people have said that she will go to Neiman's and Saks, buy a whole bunch of stuff, and return it within a week's time because she needs that money. And I also remember when Kim Zolciak accused her of writing bad checks. I guess she couldn't use her credit cards. Probably all maxed out, so she was sitting up there writing bad checks and letting them bounce. I already know that when Shereé walks into a designer store or a department store, they probably run. They're like, she's about to F my commission up.
Ladies, may we get a word?
Hide the money, y'all. There's poor people around. With your broke ass.
And Shereé, your days are numbered because Chanel and Hermes, their return policy, they don't play. And then we see Andy reading off another viewer question asking if Marlo really does have the vice president of Fendi on speed dial. So Marlo says, no, Andy, you already know the answer to that question. Marlo does have the vice president of Fendi on speed dial. And so Andy reveals that Marlo even brought her to Watch What Happens Live with her some months ago, and how she sent Lucy a gift. And we know that Andy now has a second child. He just welcomed his daughter Lucy a few months ago. So I was just thinking, once again, you want to brag about having the vice president of Fendi on speed dial, but you can't treat your friend to a clutch or a scarf or a wallet. Like, I guess, Marlo. But again, everybody doesn't have the same definition when it comes to friendship. And then we have Andy reading off another viewer question asking Kandi, why was she always shading She by Shereé on her YouTube channel? So Kandi says, let's be clear, because I have always been in support of She by Shereé, but did I throw shade? Yes, I did, because Shereé threw a lot of shade at me throughout this season. So now Shereé interjects and she says, when did I shade you, Kandi? And I'm thinking, Shereé, are we really gonna play this game right now? That is one thing about Shereé. Shereé never apologizes, and she never owns up to the things that she says and does. I can't stand that. She is quick to demand apologies from other people when she's hurt, but when it comes to admitting when she's wronged people, she cannot do it. It drives me crazy. I can't stand people like that. She never takes any accountability. Just own it and say, you know what, Kandi, you're right. You had every right to shade me because I was shading you. So Kandi says, Shereé, are you serious right now? And now she brings up the conversation that Shereé and Marlo had when they were at Sonya's cooking class. And you notice how Shereé had nothing to say when she brought that conversation up. I was like, Kandi, I would have drilled her on that. Like, no, I need you to admit that you were saying a lot of foul stuff about me and Kenya when you guys were talking. I wouldn't have let that slide. So now Kenya interjects and she says, Shereé, you do know that Kandi was rooting for you though, right? So here you have Shereé upset. I'm thinking, again, I don't know why you're upset. You're the one who's been shading Kandi all this time. And like I said, Kandi has every right to react. So Shereé says, you know, I get a lot of people sending me clips of your show and you talk about me on Speak On It every single week. But I understand though, because I know I'm good clickbait. So Kandi is visibly upset and she is insulted. I'd be insulted too. And she says, you think that I need to use you for clickbait for my show? And Shereé says, like I said, you talk about me every single week. Now, I don't watch Speak On It all the time, but when I do watch it, she's not only talking about Shereé, she's talking about the show in general. She's giving a recap the way the rest of us do. So Shereé, once again, it's the delusions of grandeur for me. Because no, you are not the main focus of the conversation. Now, if an episode is centered around you, then Kandi might talk about you a bit more. But to make it seem like she's just talking about you for no reason, that's not the case, and you know it. Shereé has a very overinflated ego. Kandi's been in the business for 3 decades. Like, let's be serious. She does not need to talk about you every week to get some views and some follows. Like, let's be real here for just a minute, Shereé. Can we do that? So Andy reads another viewer question for Shereé, and the question reads, Shereé, how can you sit there and shade Drew over Drop It with Drew when it's taken you 14 years on a clothing line that I still can't even buy fashions from? And when I tell you that the viewer questions in this first part were just chef's kiss. So Shereé in all her delusion says that she represents fashion because she loves fashion. I said, Shereé, the only things that you represent are delusions, cheapness, and being a grifter. That's what you represent. When I think of you, I don't think of fashion. And you don't have to like Drew, but to keep saying that it's a scam and to keep saying, you know, well, she doesn't look like fitness or any of that. while Drew might not be the pinnacle of fitness, let's not act like Drew looks terrible. Drew is a beautiful woman. And again, it's the delusions because you, of all people, have no room to talk about anybody's business being a scam. When all the endeavors that you try to get into have fallen apart, or it took you 14 years to complete, and things are still a hot mess. So it's like not too much on anybody else when you don't have your stuff together. And for somebody to represent fashion the way that you claim, then why weren't there some better pieces on the website? I did not expect to see copycat designs from Shein and Amazon and Fashion Nova. I'm just saying, sis. So Charade says, my issue is that Drew doesn't represent fitness. So Drew interjects and says that she does because she's been open about her health struggles and how she even had a hysterectomy. So Drew says, and yes, I've had work done. We've all had work done. You had work done. You got your boobs done, your booty done. So you're coming for me, but it's like you've done the same thing. So now Charade says that she had a mommy makeover, and then she says, I never got my booty done, sis. Squats, not shots. So Drew says, look, at the end of the day, I just thought that I would receive more support from the group, and I didn't receive it. And I thought that you, of all people, would understand that since you've had 14 years of struggle in regards to She by Shereé, so the fact that I didn't get any support from the group, it was disappointing to me. So Andy reads a viewer question for Shereé that had me screaming. The viewer wants to know, we see that Chateau Shereé and She by Shereé took extremely long to complete. Are the rumors true that you don't pay your bills? Why is there always such a delay when it comes to your projects? So already, Shereé is caught off guard by the question, and we already know that she's about to lie. So Shereé starts it off and says, well, first of all, greatness takes time. I work at my own pace, and I don't have to prove a thing to anybody. I said, oh, is that so? Not the same woman who said in season 1, episode 1, that she was a part of Atlanta's wealthy elite, and she was the it girl that everybody wanted to be around, and how she set the trends. Not that same woman who was always trying to stunt and flex on somebody, talking about, I don't have to prove myself to anybody. Are we really doing this right now, Shereé? Shereé is overly concerned with appearances and looking like she's rich, and that's why she's in the boat that she's in, because she lives beyond her means and she does not have the money to keep up. We're not going to sit up here and act like what Shereé said in this segment made any sense, because it didn't. I was just so irritated, and I really wish that Andy went harder on her, like, Shereé, really? And Shereé, we didn't forget when you went on Iyanla. And even Iyanla said, why did you build this house, Shereé? Was this really for you and your kids, or is this for you to show off? And you and Iyanla were standing outside in the cold because you couldn't even walk on your own property. It had those no trespassing signs on it. So now Shereé says, my first priority is taking care of my kids. So Andy says, but Shereé, your kids are fully grown. So she's like, well, Andy, they weren't fully grown for the whole 14 years. And even Andy wanted to say, well, they were teenagers when you built this house, sis. They weren't little babies. And I was screaming when Drew jumped in and said, so because you have kids, that's the reason why you can't pay people? Is that the reason why you couldn't pay me? I said, Drew, you better get her, because I'm still salty for you over the fact that she still hasn't paid you that $13.50. So now Shereé says, oh, I can't wait for us to talk about that, and I pay people who need to be paid. So they're all like, what? Like, what does that mean? Andy's confused, and he said, Shereé, you just said that you pay people who need to be paid, but I just have to know, when somebody sends you a bill for payment, do you pay them? So Charade says, well, it depends on what it is. So they all start laughing. I'm getting more and more irate. If you guys know me, you know that if you are cheap, that is one of the biggest pet peeves of mine. I cannot stand cheap folks. I cannot stand people who nickel and dime people. I can't stand people who cheat folks. Like, pay your bills. We all have bills. I personally feel like Shereé and people like Shereé have a lack mentality when it comes to money. Because when you look at money as, okay, I'm gonna make it again, then you don't hold on to money so tightly. Shereé just exudes low-life behavior. Them having to explain to Shereé about the importance of doing the right thing when it comes to paying people was pathetic. Because Shereé brought up how they had their dresses custom made, and she was like, well, you know, when I was talking to Marlo last night, she said something like, well, I don't like the dress, so I'm not going to give the lady the rest of the money. And so Marlo said, no, hold on now. I was just joking. I always pay people. I just made a joke like, oh, you know, if I don't pay her, then they're going to say that I'm like you. And I loved when Kenya jumped in and was like, Shereé, just because you're not satisfied with a service, it doesn't absolve you from paying them. Like, you can just pay them and then say to yourself, you know what? I'm not going to use this person again. And I said exactly that. And it's so sad because Shereé has a history of doing this. She's had contractors, landscapers suing her. Honey, I have the receipts. I was reading from 2017. Planning more debt. Shereé Whitfield sued for $10,000 after failing to pay landscaper's bill. This was in January of 2017. Radar Online got all the receipts. Shereé Whitfield may be moving from Chateau Charade to the poorhouse after uncovering the Real Housewives of Atlanta stars nearly $300,000 in unpaid tax liens. RadarOnline.com can now reveal exclusive details on her latest debt. In court papers obtained from the Magistrate Court of Fulton County in Georgia, contractor company Heritage Landscape is suing Whitfield for $10,012.50 plus $500 in costs. Mrs. Whitfield contracted the landscaping services of Heritage Landscape to help in the completion of her home. The claim filed on January 3rd read, Mrs. Whitfield has paid some, less than half of her bill, although she was happy with the work. According to the claim, Whitfield alleged she did not have the money at first, but she then changed her tune, blaming the company for poor work quality. This isn't the first time Whitfield has had trouble with contractors. In December of 2015, Stop Loss Specialists Inc. claimed Whitfield owed $15,450 in unpaid bills. They sued her for a total of $23,000, which included late fees and other charges. Shereé has a grifter's mentality. She is always trying to get over on somebody, and it's pathetic. And Shereé should have enough sense to be embarrassed. So they changed gears in the conversation, and Andy reads a viewer question asking, why does Kandi feel like it's okay to throw her cast members under the bus with off-camera information? And they go on to say that she did it to Phaedra, she's done it to Marlo, and she's done it to Shereé. So Kandi's confused. She's like, how am I throwing people under the bus? If somebody comes for me, I'm going to respond with what I know. So now Marlo interjects and she says that she wants to clear something up. It's regarding an off-camera conversation that she had with Kandi and Todd. So she's like, now Kandi, remember how Todd called me up one day about a show idea? And Kandi says, no, hold on now, because he did not just call you out of the blue. Me and you had already talked about this off camera in private. Now, you already know when Marlo's lying because she gets defensive. And she was like, well, why would I call you up about a show idea when you don't even produce? So Kandi's really annoyed. She's like, oh my gosh, Marlo, stop it. Me and you spoke. You were asking me, what could you do because you were not on the show for a while. Now, we all know the story. Kandi and Todd had hooked Marlo up with a TV show on WeTV. It was going to be about fashion and her life. And I think Funky Dineva and Rico Chappelle were also going to be on this show as well. But the story goes that Marlo messed things up because she wanted more money. So now Marlo brings up how the contract was not beneficial to her. She wasn't feeling the numbers. And she feels like Kandi is still upset about the fact that she helped Marlo And Marlo pretty much was like, well, you know, I'm not happy with the numbers, so I'm not going to sign this contract. So then Marlo says, I just feel like you won't let it go, and you always bring up how you helped me on your YouTube channel. So Kandi says, Marlo, don't do that. The only reason why I talk about it on my channel is because you have been talking about how I don't help anybody all season long on this show. You already know that Kandi's pissed when her voice starts cracking and she sounds like she's about to cry. And while I know we all get on Kandi about that, I have to say I understand it, because let's face it, nobody wants to be lied on, especially when you know that you actually did help somebody and you have the receipts and you have the proof and you have other witnesses who saw you help this person, and now for them to lie and say, well, you never helped me, that's a slap in the face. And honestly, Kandi, let this be a lesson that you never try and help Marlo again. But you see what happens when you try to help somebody who's actually jealous of you. They turn around and say that you never helped them at all. Marlo knows that she self-sabotaged her own opportunity that Kandi gave her, and she's upset, so now she wants to blame Kandi. So Marlo and Kandi are screaming at each other, and now Shereé interrupts and she's like, guys, not right now, because this is still my segment. We're still talking about me right now, so y'all can do this later. So they apologize to Shereé, and now we get right back on to Shereé and Tyrone. So Andy starts reading some viewer questions regarding why was Shereé abstinent after Tyrone came home from prison. And so Shereé says that when he first got out, they would have sex, but she couldn't take it anymore because the sex was bad and he could not satisfy her. So now Andy reads another viewer question asking Shereé if she believes that Tyrone was using her. Shereé says that she does believe it, because before they started taping, he was trying to get her to sign some contracts and she wouldn't sign them. And she thinks that because of that, he was angry at her. I said, now, it doesn't take a genius to see that Tyrone was using Shereé. He's in prison. She's a reality star. I mean, let's do the math here. So now Andy brings up Shereé's new man. He wants to know all about Martell Holt. Now, for everybody who watches Love and Marriage Huntsville, then we all know who Martell Holt is, a hot mess. I mean, that man is so toxic. I stopped watching the show, I think after like season 2. Whatever season it was when Melody was pregnant with the 4th baby. That's when I stopped watching. So Shereé says that he's a nice guy and they've been dating for a few months. Andy drops the boyfriend word, and Shereé's like, oh my gosh, well, I wouldn't say that he's my boyfriend. We're just dating, taking it day by day. So Andy's asking Shereé, what does Martell do for a living? And Shereé says, well, you know, he's on another reality show, but he's also in real estate, and he also just launched a wine line. Now, for all my Love and Marriage Huntsville watchers, I've heard that Melody is the one with the builder's license, which means that Martell really can't do anything without Melody. So is he still in real estate if he doesn't have a builder's license? Let me know down below. But I definitely think that Martell is using Shereé because Shereé is on the more popular of the two shows. She's on the more popular network. I don't believe that this is a real love connection. I also think that Shereé views this as a storyline for her, since her Tyrone storyline fell through. And now Andy reads another viewer question asking Shereé, how can she date Martell knowing what he did to his ex-wife? So she's trying to play dumb, like she doesn't know what he did. And now Kenya interjects and she says, well, he cheated on his ex-wife and had a baby with another woman. And did you guys catch when Shereé said, I think that we all ignore red flags? I was like, Shereé, please speak for yourself. Don't include the rest of us in your mess. Please don't. Everybody does not ignore red flags. Some of us have good sense to say shout out to everybody, I have fun, when they see some things that are kind of questionable.
Oh! Shout out to everybody. I had fun.
I gotta be good.
So Shereé's making all these excuses. She says, well, you know, watching him on the show, I would never want to date him, but meeting him in person, he's really nice, he's really fun. Of course, he's really attractive, but you know me, I've never been one to go for looks. So I died because Kenya said under her breath, we know because we all saw what Bob looked like. And I was like, Kenya, no, you didn't. Listen, we all know that when Shereé saw Bob, all she saw was money. So Charade says that getting to know Martell, he's a different guy. And then Sanya interjects and says, one thing about Charade, she doesn't care what anybody thinks. She's going to do what she wants to do in regards to men. So Andy closes out her segment and wishes Charade all the best. When it comes to Charade and Martell, all I have to say is God bless. I think that Charade is a fool to think that Martell is going to be different for her. I don't understand what's appealing about a man who's a serial cheater, who cheated on his first wife, had a baby with his mistress, and then left the mistress high and dry. I don't get it, but if Shereé likes it, then go ahead. Because it seems like when it comes to men, there's a disconnect with Shereé. I think that Shereé is somebody who has self-esteem issues for whatever reason, because her choice in men, it really makes no sense. First Bob, then Tyrone, now Martell. 0 for 3. But again, it's Shereé's life. If she's happy, then who are we to be more concerned than she is? So now we get to the Sonya and Drew segment, and I'm going to breeze past this because all in all, Sanya made no sense. I want Sanya to just admit to herself that she did flip-flop, she has no real reason to be upset with Drew, and that she just wanted to align herself with the cool girls. She viewed Drew as an easy target, and she thought that she would just cast aside Drew, and that would be that. I was still confused because, like I said, Sanya made no sense. So Andy wants to know, where do Sanya and Drew stand today? Sanya says that she talks to everybody else in this group except for Drew. So now Andy wants to know, where did things go wrong, because he was bummed to see their friendship kind of go to the wayside. And Drew says that she was confused as well because she had invited Sanya to her mom's 77th birthday. She introduced Sanya to a lot of people. So now Sanya interrupts and she says, Drew, who did you introduce me to? So Drew says, I introduced you to Shamia, like she was there. And once again, I just think that Sanya is a social climber. I think that she was trying to see if she could do better than Drew, so to speak. So here goes Sanya saying that Drew has milked this whole situation and made herself out to be the victim. So Sanya goes on to say that she told Drew face to face about the conversation that she had with Kenya. So Andy wants some clarification. He's like, so you're saying that you guys had an off-camera conversation? And so Sanya says yes, that Drew's makeup artist and Ralph were present for this conversation as well. So Drew's denying this. She's like, no, that didn't happen. And then Sanya says, Drew, just be honest for once, okay? Ralph knows, I know, you know, the makeup artist knows, like, just stop. So Sanya's going on and on about how when she first met Drew, Drew was lighthearted and jovial and so much fun, but Drew would always complain to Sanya about when she fights the other girls, she seems confrontational, but she's really not like that. Then Sanya says that as she was getting to know Drew, Drew was turning into the person that she claimed that she didn't want to be. She was always fighting somebody. So I was thinking, so that's the reason why you were that angry at Drew? And Sanya, the logic makes no sense because everybody on this cast is always at each other's throats. So for you to act like Drew is so confrontational, always fighting with somebody, that's the case for everybody on this cast. You know when somebody's trying to find a reason to dislike you, that's what Sanya was giving when she was trying to find a reason of why she was just so upset with Drew. It wasn't clicking, it wasn't making any sense. And once again, I'm on Drew's side. So Sanya goes on to say that she was just blindsided by Drew. Drew is still confused, like, girl, how are you blindsided? Like, what are you talking about? So now Sanya says, off camera and on camera, you betrayed my trust and you always overtalked me. So now Andy reads a viewer question directed at Drew, asking her if that's the reason why she has so many problems in her marriage to Ralph and with the other ladies on the cast, because she's always over talking somebody and not listening. So Drew says that she's actually in therapy to work on that, and how now if somebody calls her out on over talking them, she apologizes and acknowledges it. Then she goes on to say that the doctor told her that she's a work in progress. Now, personally, I feel like they all overtalk each other. Everybody in this group is a poor listener, so I don't understand why Drew is getting all this flack for overtalking. And we just saw Marlo and Kandi overtalking each other. Shereé and Kandi were just overtalking each other just a few minutes ago. So once again, I'm not understanding why Drew is getting all this flack for overtalking. So now Andy addresses the whole clout chasing comment that Marlo made about Sanya earlier on in this season, when Sanya only invited Kandi and Kenya to her Mommy Nation photo shoot. So Sanya says, well, it's okay because Marlo didn't even know me like that when she said it, so it's fine. And then she adds that she originally invited Drew, and then she says, and Drew only has 500,000 followers. You think I want to clout chase off of that? And I was like, Sanya, really? Like, 500,000 followers, that's still a good amount. It might not be 1 million followers, but 500,000 is nothing to sneeze at. And Sanya, how many followers do you have? So now Sanya starts getting teary-eyed and she says, look, I was genuinely trying to get to know everybody, and now she starts crying. And Sanya, I still feel like you're the one who started this whole entire mess with Drew. So I really don't know why you're crying. I think that you're crying because your plan backfired and you were the one with egg on your face. So now Andy wants to know if this is a friendship breaker for the both of them, if there's a way that they can get past this. And Drew says, look, I still feel like she's a flip-flopper. So now Andy turns to Shereé and he's like, Shereé, do you think that Drew is a flip-flopper? And Shereé says, well, I don't know if I would say she's a flip-flopper, but I would say that she's a liar. I was thinking, Shereé, do you hear yourself right now? You're one of the biggest liars on this cast, calling somebody else a liar. You don't even pay people. You lie and you cheat. So I'm just laughing, like the jokes truly write themselves. We can literally go down a list starting from season 1, episode 1 of all the times that Shereé lied. And Drew, I would have checked Shereé right then and there, like, who are you calling a liar? So now it's time for Marlo's segment, and Andy starts it off by asking if her nephews were able to spend some quality time with her mom. So immediately Marlo's emotional and she says, yeah, but it wasn't as much time as I would have liked. So Marlo continues on by saying that it was one of her mom's best visits, but her mom unfortunately went back to her old ways. So now Marlo reveals that she hates talking about this because her mom had a really awful childhood because her mom didn't know how to raise kids. So now Marlo brings up how she loves seeing Mama Joyce be protective and love on Kandi because that's what a mom should do, and she wishes that she had that. And then she says that she hates when the girls make her feel like she's not worthy. And I was thinking, nobody else can give you your worth. So again, Marlo, that's a self-esteem issue, and you have to work on that for yourself. The fact that you're blaming this group for why your self-esteem or why your self-worth is the way it is, that's unfair to everybody else. And that's a lot of power to give anybody. So we learned that from the ages of 10 to 18, Marlo went to 5 different foster homes. And we learned that the reason why she ran away in the first place was because her mom was always beating her. And one day in particular, her mom beat her so bad that she decided, I can't take this anymore, so she just ran off. So Marlo says that the first family that she lived with was a Jamaican family. Things were good, but then the father was abusive. So she was placed with another family, and the woman that she was living with, the woman was strict, and Marlo was telling everybody that the lady was strict. And so one day she came back home, and the woman said, pack your bags, you have to leave, because you're walking around telling everybody that I'm strict, and the woman was very image conscious, so she didn't like that. So then she went to another home. The woman was a school teacher. She had a daughter. The woman loved her. She was good to her. But one day, same thing happened. She came home from school, and the lady told her, I'm sorry, but you have to pack your bags because my daughter feels like she's not getting enough attention from me since you're here. So Andy wants to know, how did Marlo feel always being in search of a home? So Marlo says, I felt bad about it. And then she brings up that it hurts to be excluded from certain circles. And then she talks about how she's judged in this group. She brings up Kenya calling her an iconic ex-con. And then she's like, I'm sitting here today with a media mogul. I'm sitting here with a singer and an actress. I'm sitting here with an Olympic gold medalist and a former Miss USA and a music producer and one of the OGs who built this platform. And then to be here, like, that's a big deal. Now, I have to be honest, there were some moments where it felt like Marlo wasn't making a whole lot of sense, because I was thinking, what does all this have to do with what Andy just asked you? And also, the way you've dogged out Kenya and Kandi, you called Kenya and Kandi former sluts, former hoes, but now it's, former USA and a big time music producer and actress and singer. It's like, girl, which one is it? 1 minute you sing their praises, the next minute you can't stand them, and they haven't even done that much. So now Andy wants to know, did Marlo always want the peach because it would make her feel wanted? And why was it such a big deal for her to be a full-time cast member on Housewives? So Marlo says, yeah, I would always be emotional about that. Like, why am I not worthy enough to be a full-time cast member? Am I too ghetto? Is it because I'm an ex-con? And if you read Not All Diamonds and Rosé, then you know that Marlo spoke about it. She said it herself that when the Bravo cameras came to her house, she had her mom there. Her mom was drinking some juice out the carton and cursing and yelling, and they were like, yeah, we'll pass. So Marlo already knows the reason of why Bravo was not interested in making her a full-time cast member. So now Andy turns to Kenya, and he's like, Kenya, was Marlo the housewife that you expected her to be? So Kenya says no, she went the complete opposite way. Instead of showing the world how big her heart is, she did the complete opposite. Like I've said, like many of you guys have said, Marlo has been a complete flop as a full-time housewife. She was better off remaining a friend of the show. So now Andy brings up how good of a friend Marlo was to Kenya when they were in New York. And Kenya's like, well, good friend is a bit of a stretch. So now Marlo says, oh yeah, I was laying on you and everything. We had a really good time. So Kenya says, well, that might be so, but you turned around and weaponized everything that I told you, and you took low blows, talking about my husband in each episode. Like, who does that? So now Marlo lies and says, I never talked about your husband. I was thinking, Marlo, now we're not going to do this. You said repeatedly, that's why Mark left you. You said that at Drew's Drop It by Drew event. You said it, I want to say in Blue Ridge. You said it at least 3 times. So let's not do that. We can roll the tape back if you want to. But what you won't sit up here and do is lie. So now Andy wants to know if Marlo has ever had an emotionally or sexually fulfilled relationship with a man, and Marlo says no. Now, I didn't need Marlo to admit that. I think that that's something that we all knew without her even saying. It's apparent that there's a bit of a disconnect when it comes to Marlo and men. We don't really hear her speaking about boyfriends or her dating. It's always some mystery man in the shadows, or she's discussing the billionaire that she was with, 15 years ago. I'm going to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that Marlo has never been in love with somebody. I just don't think that Marlo is capable. I think with all the trauma that she's been through, we see the way she acts with her own friends, so I really can't see her being vulnerable and falling in love with a man. I just don't see it. And then when Andy was asking her if she has relationship issues with men, and Marlo said yes, Her nephews even tell her that she's afraid to let a man in and she needs to work on that. I wasn't surprised hearing it. So now Marlo goes on a full-blown rant and she says, going from 5 foster homes, you don't know what I've had to do. You don't know what I've had to deal with. Y'all couldn't walk a mile in my shoes, but y'all want to call me whores and prostitutes. And she is just going off. So now you have Kenya interrupting and she's like, can I say something? And that's where the first part of this reunion ends. But let me just say that when it comes to Marlo using her story as this Uno card to slap down as an excuse to treat people badly and say awful things about people is unacceptable. And at a certain point, people do get tired of hearing your sad story. They do. And having a sad story or something bad happening to you does not absolve you from still being a respectful and decent human being. But y'all, that was my recap. I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. And you guys already know what to do. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you all later. Bye.